am sitting here with retired Air Force Lieutenant General Richard Harding about the war in Ukraine and kind of, continuing our discussion from what we were having earlier tonight. Putin and his calculation with the war in Ukraine. We've seen the headlines where it says, Putin has miscalculated, this war. Right. You've seen the Western, countries coming together arm in arm. It sounds like Putin probably thought he could poke some holes into, some weaknesses, but indeed, we've come together. And so kind of talk about, what that looks like and your thoughts on kind of that miscalculation, if you will.
I think he may have thought that this was going to be as easy as going into the Donbass, where he had been supplying the insurgents there, which largely there are a lot of Russian speakers in the Donbass. And then in Crimea, he was able to take that pretty quickly.
Right.
And then he tried to take the rest of it. And I think what he miscalculated was that when they went with democracy as their form of government, the nation was kind of enthusiastic about that, and still is. And to try to roll that back, even if you can militarily defeat the Ukrainian army, is going to be next to impossible, because they're going to want it back. And as I say, you're looking at potentially a very long-term insurgency. And if he had studied insurgency, he would know that that there's, you can't win those things when you've got neighboring countries supplying arms and other material, fuel to the insurgents, and that you need to be able to secure local population areas. And the army he has right now is not big enough. Ukraine's about the size of Texas,
right?
And how are you going to secure it, even with 100,000 troops? So if it's a long-term insurgency, it's going to look a lot like Afghanistan for the Russians.
Sure.
And so how do you get out of Afghanistan? Well, they left, but they clearly can't say that they won there. So, this is war by other means, the insurgency.
You're seeing a lot of countries, put sanctions on Russia, and even, leaders in Russia, Switzerland even commenting, and they usually stay neutral. And so Putin's really isolating himself in the situation. Yes. Are sanctions enough, would you say?
Sanctions, economic sanctions, are one tool in the toolkit. There are other things that can be done, and I'm sure will be done. Information warfare is what it's called, but actually getting the facts out to the Russian citizens that, hey, you're losing sons and daughters right now, and what's the point? And, we no longer have Voice of America, but there are ways you can deal with that. Cyber war is also possible. We're not likely to pull the trigger on that first, but Russia's used it several times and directed it against the United States to include, according to all 17 intelligence agencies, interfering with our election. So you can almost count that that's probably their next step. So there are a lot of other things that can be done. What's, I think, important is to stay the course, not only for the United States, but for all of our allies, and isolate Putin. And
we seem to be doing
containment.
that.
Containment ought to be our strategy. That's what we used during the Cold War. And it worked out pretty well, and I think we need to go back to that.
Okay. Lieutenant General, thank you so much for your insight tonight. We really appreciate it. And, of course, I want to continue to have more of this conversation coming up later tonight.